Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Berzins, and welcome to the Audio Production Town Hall. This is where we talk about professional audio topics every month. This month, we've got Andy Slater, who we'll be talking with about accessibility and sound design topics. So, Andy, first things first. I'm not sure how to introduce you because you seem to do so many different things. How would you describe yourself? Like, if you were to give yourself a professional title, what would you call yourself?
Oh, my professional title, at least at my job, is sound designer and accessibility lead. But I also do a lot of music composition and performance and that sort of thing. A lot of it is informed by my disability, but not entirely. So I don't know. Maybe that works.
So, for the people at home who don't know, you are legally blind, correct?
Yes, yeah, right. I identify as blind, even though I think like the medical model says that I'm legally blind or low vision. I'm not totally blind, but
Okay.
yeah, I just prefer to identify as blind.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Yep.
And if I read your bio correctly, you kind of started working in sound primarily as a result of the disability. Like you weren't born blind, correct?
Right. Yeah, correct. So I was diagnosed with my eye disease, retinitis pigmentosa, back in 1980, and I was 5. And I used to draw a lot and paint a lot, and I was very creative, and I was just like art, an art weirdo, right? And then when I got to high school, my vision started, I guess, degrading, and I was no longer able to read like regular print book, and I was given all these large print books, and it was just a huge hassle. And because of all this, I got really discouraged and frustrated and stopped painting and drawing. But then purchased like a Tascam Porta 7, a 4-track, like a cassette 4-track, and started doing a bunch of like sound collage stuff that I was kind of considering to be more like painting and less like music. And so I was maybe 15 or 16, and then went on to work with a lot of modular synthesizers and do a bunch of stuff like that. So it was kind of like I didn't really do any work about being blind, but it was definitely a thing as I was training my ears and my listening practices became more advanced and nuanced and stuff like that. I started creating things that I think were most relatable to at least my own experience.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting that you came from a visual art background. I came from a visual art background. Like, I went to school to study visual art and then just kind of drifted into sound. And one of
Right.
my main mentors, who won an Oscar for sound, majored in, film or majored in painting. So there's a lot
Yeah,
of
and there you go.
crossover between visual art and sound design, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, it can encourage and inspire all kinds of everything. So I think we're all in a good place when we are intersectional like that.
So you are a sound designer at Fair Winds. I remember that correctly. Is it?
Fair Worlds.
Fair Worlds. I knew I was going to screw that one up. I was like, Fair Worlds, and you're the principal sound designer for them. Okay.
Yep. And accessibility lead. So I
Accessibility lead.
work on both things. Yeah.
And what kind of projects do they tend to work on?
We do a lot of extended reality, like VR and AR and mixed reality sort of stuff, either site specific or apps or headset related work, and then also a lot of video and any other kind of like basically like what a digital design firm would do, but with a focus on XR.
Okay. So, a lot of our students are familiar with game audio and, technologies related around that. This is
Right.
something related to game audio, but it's not explicitly game specific,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Yeah, it's not explicitly game specific. Like we have one of our clients is the Environmental Defense Fund, and we created an AR app, and then they have a methane tracking satellite that is going to be launched into outer space soon, and for like the AR app that was used at like COP26 and these other like um, climate change conferences, I got to do the sound design for the satellites, the different satellites probing the Earth, and got to do all these like cool bleep blorp sort of things. So there's designs for that, and then there's other game sound and music, and then like cool like battle sounds or just UI sounds and that sort of thing. So I also do a lot of like dialogue editing and narration editing and that sort of thing.
So for many of our sighted students, who are used to using digital audio tools in a computer system, they don't think about how a blind person might operate that. Like operating a console or something that's very tactile is kind of intuitive. Like, sure, you can touch it, you can feel it, but so much of what we use now tool-wise is all in the computer, it's all on a screen. So how are you able to interface with the tools to do your work?
Yeah, I mean, outside of using like, control surfaces or any of those like hybrid analog and like, digital control surface mixers and stuff like that, I work primarily with Pro Tools, and I do a lot of in the box. Sometimes I'll do hand mixing with the controller, but since I'm doing a lot of sound design stuff, a lot of it is based more on processing and editing and stuff. And so I'm a Mac user, and with every Mac product, whether it's your computer, your desktop, your laptop, your phone, your iPad, or your watch, or even your TV, it comes with this native accessibility feature called VoiceOver, which is the screen reader, which I use a lot of. I also use some screen magnification depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes, to zoom in on a video, because I'll do some video sound, or maybe there's a plugin or something that isn't totally accessible. And so with Pro Tools, if you're familiar with creating macros with like Keyboard Maestro or any of these sort of things, just like shortcut keys or hotkeys or whatever, there's a community of blind engineers that created a set of macros for Pro Tools called Flow Tools. And so it's basically you navigate with your screen reader throughout your program, and you just have a number of different options, so you don't have to rely on the mouse or any of the graphic user interfaces and that sort of thing. And so real quick, I'll just click this on, and maybe you can hear how I navigate Zoom.
VoiceOver on Zoom.
Let's see.
Zoom meeting window. Original sound. Original gallery view. Original sound up gallery view. No original Zoom meet. Close.
I don't know. Hopefully you could hear that. So Zoom's kind of hard to navigate when you're in the meeting, but yeah. So the screen reader speaks, things on screen that, are, if you think of it as like selectable text, like, if you're able to like copy and paste it, that sort of thing. And then sometimes the screen recognition can actually, read a button that's more of like a PNG or a JPEG and that sort of thing. So my workflow is tremendously fast because I don't have to zoom in to look, to edit. I just listen, I hit a button, or I can go just, when I'm editing, just type in the exact, either it's time code or minutes and seconds or bars or whatever, and just, edit like that, anything really. You can access plugins, you can, I can get into the plugins and adjust parameters and that sort of thing. So yeah, based on this, this community building, and then also, with some interaction with Avid, Flow Tools is becoming more and more, practical and accessible and just kind of easy to do. You can even control the mouse, so you can do like mouse actions and that sort of thing. So long story short, that's how I do it. And then if you're a Reaper user, there's also a set of macros called Osara that was, built by the community as well. So, there's multiple ways of doing that.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to me that you mentioned how fast you're able to do things. I would imagine in many cases you are faster than some sighted sound editors and designers. We always teach students the importance of learning keyboard shortcuts and things to speed up their workflow. All these tools have been developed for the screen, and then we have to go and say, well, try not to rely so much on the mouse. Try not to look so much with your eyes, and try to get into a workflow of using your ears and using your key commands. So in many ways, we try to train people to work more like a blind individual would and rely less on what they're seeing. So I think that's kind of cool that you're able to
And that, yeah, and that's really smart too, because it's like with the key commands that are in Pro Tools that Avid built in, we work around those with Flow Tools, so they rarely conflict with each other. But I know engineers who have moved on to trackballs because their wrist hurts them from like scrolling around the mouse all the time, and especially if they're working like in the box and don't have a controller and they're adjusting fades with the mouse. And I'm just like, man, I just use command and option and up and down, and that adjusts my volume, or I just reach out to the controller. Or yeah, I mean, my wrists are fine, I can still play the tambourine and other stuff like that. So it's definitely a great way to think, especially if you get yourself in the mindset of not looking. You could still, you can use the transport with your, with your number pad and all those other things, and you don't need to look at the screen. You don't need to even like look at the video that you're watching or editing to, in order to really just focus on the sound. A lot of the times I don't have my monitor on. Sometimes I do, but a lot of the times it's just, turned off or, out of the way and that sort of thing. Because yeah, I really, I don't think visually. I mean, there's certainly some aspects that I think with like certain visual mixers, it's good to see, an EQ curve. Like if you're working with something where, you want to go with like RIAA standards, and you're using like what tonal balance with ozone or something, where it shows you what this genre specific would look like with the curves and stuff like that. Maybe that's good to pay attention to when you're done, but that also might be something that if you're you're doing mastering. But even then, if you have to rely on that, it means that you haven't really lived up to the potential of your focus and your listening skills.
Right. I mean, it's interesting to me that so many audio tools have moved towards the visual or focus, or like
Right.
the ocular, I guess, is the
Right. Yeah.
common term. So it's like you look at older audio tools that, at least from my imagining of it, were more accessible. If you're talking about tape, you're talking about an analog console. It's like these are all physical, tactile things. You're not staring at a screen all day. So with all the
Modular
advancements that came,
synthesizers. Yeah.
it's like all of that was more accessible than, in many ways, what we have now, where it's like, oh, we have to adapt everything to the screen, but now after the fact, try and make it as accessible as it used to be.
Right. No menu diving with those things, right? You don't have to scroll through these tiny little menus and stuff, and you can even do that less and less with your Zoom recorders or your sound devices stuff now too. So it's like, to operate things, maybe you got to look at it, but a lot of the times it's, you realize where the button is, and just, if you're in your studio and you could reach up and patch something without having to look, that's great. Like I have my patch bay and stuff under my desk here, and I don't have to look. I just, up, 3 down, plug that in, up, there's the reverb, that sort of thing. And, those are operational things, but you don't need your eyes to listen, really,
Right. That's something we always try to emphasize. So students often will look at the waveform, because we have the waveform display. It's very convenient to try to evaluate where you are by looking at it. But in many ways, it is a crutch, because you're not having to actually really get in there and listen. So
right. I mean, like monitoring levels, that's one thing. I can do that. I can get the screen reader will speak, the readout of the level. And when it's peaking and that sort of thing, so I get a good idea. But it's also like with old analog consoles, sometimes you just crank it, and then when you hear the needle hit the side, then it's too hot, that kind of thing. So that's something where you might want to use your eyes, but you really definitely don't need to.
You are basically working in more of an old school kind of mentality of just use your ears, and if it sounds good, it is good, and stop worrying about what you're looking at, which I think can be a useful kind of thing to teach anyone, working in audio these days. We tend to focus too much on what we're looking at on the screen, I think. And if you are an audio professional, you always should be listening first and using your ears first and foremost.
Right. So. I mean, I know engineers that will turn stuff on, plug things in, and not even have their studio monitors on. They'll just look at the level and like, all right, yeah, that looks good, without knowing if there's interference, if there's like a bad cable, or even if like the mic, it's like you're so confident that you put that mic in the right place on that snare. The drummer plays that way. So I always kind of roll my eyes at that stuff. Like, man, just turn it on. But yeah, I mean, there's always a certain set of rules and best practices with recording, but so much of it should be, not so much, a lot of it should be focused on your comfort level in the studio and adapting to how you work, and, if you do a combination of, of looking at stuff and then honing in your listening skills, yeah, I mean, that's golden. And I think that's something over the years I've seen a lot of people just kind of, I don't know, disregard that sort of, combination of the two. So yeah, and I've been using Pro Tools since like 97,
Nice.
and so
Yes, I was.
it's interesting to see how my workflow has progressed.
So you
Like I had
mentioned,
said earlier.
sorry, you mentioned, working not just in the studio, though. You also are heavily into field recording. You mentioned
Yes.
using sound devices, recorders.
Yep.
We do try to teach our students in audio production, field recording techniques using Zoom recorders. Our students get a Zoom H5.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that device is not accessible to a blind user.
Correct.
Correct.
The way that a lot of blind people, when they use the H5 or the H6 or whatever, is they, you have the menu and then they kind of memorize how many times to press the button down and then over and that sort of thing. Or they've already got it ready where they just turn it on and it's like, I know it's at 24 and 48K. And so, you monitor, then, you've got the track enabled and that sort of thing. But, that really kind of limits, the potential of everything. It's good to put limits on yourself, but, it's also, if you have technology like that, you should be able to learn it in and out. But as these newer models come, like the Zoom F6 is something that I have, where, and the Zoom H3, which is like the little ambisonic recorder, those controller apps are accessible with the screen reader on my phone. And so I'm able to use it as a transport, set the sample rate, set it to ambisonic mode if I need to, change the gain. There's a little mixer and all these other sort of things. So, it's really wonderful. I don't have to spend any time looking at the little menu. And, I feel like, if you're doing, you're doing recording in the field and you're using something like that, those little menus, whether you're sighted or not, can often get, like glare or the sun or something like that will mess with it. Or if your recorder is 30 feet away from you, like off in the woods or something like that, you could stand back and these apps will work with Bluetooth and you can just trigger them like that. But, with them being made accessible, that means, blind folks can use them, universally accessible. Anybody can use them now. And that's what I think is great as this technology kind of, grows and becomes more reliant on, human computer interfacing, then, a lot of people are taking into consideration who gets to use it. And, some companies are very, keen on letting blind people use their stuff.
That's cool. I think we had a question
Oh,
from a student.
All right. Hey, so we have a question. Do you use the scrubbing tool or scrubber tool or use the down arrow to mark where you want to start an edit when waveform editing?
I do both. And I rely on tab the transients all the time. But yeah, I don't use the scrubber tool. I'll use, on the number pad, I have like 1 and 2 on the number pad, basically assigned to being the shuttle. So you can adjust the speed of how you want to scrub back and forth. And so, yeah, that's a lot of the times I'll use that for really, really pinpointed editing, or I'll use tab to transient, or yeah, I'll hit the down arrow. I'll listen and then I'll just nail it. And then sometimes I'll roll back and I'll try again. But I've gotten pretty good at nailing it. But yeah, and then I put markers in all the time for everything, to the point where it's exhausting and overwhelming.
So maybe related to that, previously you mentioned that you do work on projects that involve video, correct? How do you approach that? Like, how is that something like? I mean, are there something like pre-spotted for you, or are you able to kind of identify the start and end times independently? How does that work?
It really depends. A lot of the times they're pre-spotted with, like, I'll get the script all the way down to the time code when there's like a transition or something like that. And I've worked with a lot of like, 3D animation stuff where I'll get the director and even the animator will pinpoint, like, there's, this gradient changes to this. So, consider that. Maybe you can add this sound or that sort of thing. Or there's a fade here from right to left. So we get these kind of like descriptions from the creator. But then also, yeah, sometimes people will even give me like, the beeps on like where the scene changes. Like they'll add little beeps on the timeline or just even the time code. And so, I'll work like that and, send a mix over. And then if it's like any kind of adjustment, I can do that. Or a lot of the times, the video editors are able to nudge it themselves,
That's cool. So you, I believe, work with other visually impaired sound designers or aspiring people in that vein. Going back to the field recording aspect of your work, you actually are involved with an organization that is sort of devoted to getting people out and listening in the field and recording things. That's now that my mind is slipping on that one. Can you remind me of the name of that one?
Yeah. So it's the program's called the Young Sound Seekers, and it's out of the Atlantic Center for the Arts out there in the Orlando area, outside Orlando, based out of Stetson University. And I was down there last month for a week-long sort of audio summer camp with some blind young adults, ages 14 to 22. They're all teamed up with the Conklin Davis School for the Blind. And the program's been going on for a couple of years. I've been on the advisory board, but then finally was able to make it down there. And some of the learners have low vision, but enough to operate one of the Zoom H6s, and then some were using the Shure Motive app with the MV88 microphone, and that Motive app is very accessible on your iOS or even your Android and that sort of thing. So, using these using these tools that are accessible and practical to them, we were doing some field recordings out at Canaveral Seashore. There's a lot of attention towards these natural sounds. It's sponsored by the National Park Service, or the Night Skies and Natural Sounds Division, and teaching a lot of acoustic ecology, and going out in the world and listening to what's going on around you, and then capturing that, and then editing it together either as a straight field recording, or doing something creative, some creative editing, or even treating it maybe as like something for a podcast and that sort of thing. Yeah, and they're all blind, and so we all have unique relationships with sound, and we all kind of pick up on these different nuances and stuff. We don't have magical hearing, I don't think. we can pretend that we do, but a lot of it is just intuitive, just to our own lived experience, or we've trained our ears. A lot of like orientation and mobility training, like how to navigate with a white cane or with your guide dog, or however. A lot of it does rely on paying attention to your surroundings, using your ears, and like spatializing things and localizing things, and that comes in really handy when you're listening.
Right, you're active listening all the time. It's not a special.
All the time.
It's not a special circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, there's like past. Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of echolocation too, where it's like actively when I'm clicking, like that helps me get like impulse responses and that sort of thing, and then passively where I can just hear things in an environment just change based on if a car drives by, an electric car that you can't hear, kind of goes by, I can hear it behind me, like just change, just like put an acoustic shadow on that space. Like any kind of sound that was in that space is already bouncing back. And so like paying attention to that reflection stuff helps me navigate and get around, and
again, that's useful
really
as a sound designer. You got to be able to reproduce all that stuff after the fact.
Yep. And then also with the spatial audio stuff that I do, and like the ambisonic and immersive stuff, it's there's so much room to get really creative and weird and do a lot of sci-fi and like fictional sort of environments, but I'm also very comfortable doing these sort of like natural sounding things because of based on my relationship to localizing and and spatialized audio and sound and that sort of thing.
Field recording is very interesting because lots of people do it for different reasons. You can do field recording for a particular game or a film project. You mentioned acoustic ecology, so some field recordists take it from more of like almost like a scientific mindset of like trying to preserve the sounds of nature. Which is not something that many people think about. People who tend to live in an urban environment, they're used to a lot of noise pollution. A lot of people haven't even really experienced natural sound much. So the acoustic ecology aspect is trying to, preserve those natural sounds so they don't kind of get lost, right? So how much of that, you said you do some aspect of acoustic ecology. I mean, what is the sort of end goal of that kind of work?
A lot of that is, I don't necessarily have the privilege to go somewhere where there's no urban sound. Like when I was, down at, Canaveral Seashore or like Blue Spring and that sort of thing, I had the ability to just listen. And every once in a while there was a plane going on overhead because there's, a lot of pilots apparently down there. And so, you listen and then you record. For me, it was just like, having this, oh my God, here's all these recordings of woodpeckers that I recorded. I don't hear that in the city. And so for me, it's just preserving that, just like a record of where I was and that sort of thing. And then, hey, if I need a bird sound, I have that. I don't have to go to a library, right? Which is fun. It's, using sound effects and Foley libraries are great. I do it all the time, but to be able to have my own is really wonderful. But it's also, a lot of like urban planners and like you said, scientists, they'll listen to the changes in the environment and the sound and, what might be considered like sound pollution or what, intrusive sort of things like with highways and trains and that sort of thing. Or like the coral reef sounds different. That, that's another clue as to how that's like, eroding and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a big focus with field recordings of people just getting these sounds and capturing what it's really like in nature. And I enjoy doing that, but I also like to use it for sound design and, processing or like music concrete sort of editing and composing and that sort of thing. And I use a lot of it, like I said, in my sound design. I had my ambisonic mic out in my yard on the 4th of July and, fireworks, man, you can do anything with those. I was making a drum kit or I was like slowing them down and that sort of thing to kind of create like a spaceship rumble. And, you do anything, you think about how, what in Indiana Jones, they, the big boulder was just basically a car going down a hill in gravel. And they just went out and recorded it on the Niagara and then, slowed it down and that sort of thing. So it can be a really great tool. And it gets you outside, right? Sure. It really gets you down in the dirt thinking about like, okay, I'm going to capture this and get it back in the studio and process it if I need to, clean it up if I need to. Sometimes it's just perfect,
Yeah, I mean, using the same libraries over and over again can get boring. Hearing the same sound in a film or in a game that you recognize, that'll pull you out of the experience. It's like, oh, I know what, library that comes from.
I know, yeah. When you hear somebody else like, oh, yeah, I know that one. So it's like, I know where you got that.
That's from
that's
that Sound
cool.
Ideas disc. And then,
right. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of cool, but like still it's just really fulfilling to grab your own, especially if you have like access to a Foley pit, you can record your own footsteps or smash some ceramic bowl or glass or something like that. Yeah, I get a kick out of that.
For sure. I think we're getting close to our kind of Q&A time. Did we want to, no more questions? Okay. No, nobody else? Okay. Well, cool. Did we have a hard wrap time or hard out? What was it? Keep going? We have lots to talk about, Andy. We can keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I got I don't have any other meetings today. So.
Okay, cool.
We have about 15 minutes.
About 15 minutes? Okay. So on the accessibility front, you're using, you talk about flow tools, you're using these other things. You work primarily in this game-related sort of space. How are you primarily working with your teammates? Are you just primarily, responsible for doing the source recording, editing, and then delivering that to the other teammates? How does that work?
Yeah. So since, middleware isn't, fully accessible. I know that, and so we'll do a Zoom meeting, and I'll, kind of like give my, my opinion on how the mix is going and that sort of thing. And it's cool. It works. I'm able to use, to beta test the app or hear the recordings of that sort of thing. And it's kind of tricky. So, not being able to do the sound mixing myself in Unity because it's not accessible, so much like click and drag sort of thing. And then, with, any of the audio middleware not really, there yet for me, makes it hard. But, it's still possible. It's like if your developer is, comfortable with sound mixing and that sort of thing, then hey, that's wonderful, because it also means that they're already thinking about sound, and you don't have to go to all lengths to try to explain what you're doing or why you're doing it. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm really lucky and privileged in my situation where the developers are very much into that and have a good understanding of how it works.
You're more or less just producing the sessions remotely and telling them what they should do.
Yeah, making the assets either to spec or just coming up with my own.
Just so our students know, our students do learn Wise as the sort of middleware tool set. They have an understanding of game engines, but for the game or the projects you work on, they're using like the built-in audio system, something where they're not using any kind of audio middleware. It's just whatever the game engine can do audio-wise natively.
So there's like Dear Reality does Dear VR for Unity, so that like that's the sound game engine for that. But yeah, some of them do stuff in Unreal as well. But yeah, like Wise is a really great way to communicate that stuff, and you as the designer be able to do all the cool creative stuff that a developer isn't always going to have time to work on. Blending stuff and figuring out any of the aspects or properties that you envision. So like that's really important. And so I mean, like I took a class in Unity. I know how it works. I can't react to it. I've also done some studying into Wise. I know how it works, but I haven't been able to really get in on it myself. But I know I at least know how important those two things are, the middleware and things like Unity and Unreal. So knowing how those communicate, being able to communicate with the developer and the other people, especially the other sound designers and stuff, is almost as important as the assets that you're delivering, because then they get you have this open discussion. You get a good idea of how they want to how they hear it, and then how you hear it, and communication is the key with any kind of client or anything.
Right. It really does seem to vary based on company to company and developer to developer, as far as how much concern they have for accessibility, even down to the development tools. I mean, it is kind of disappointing that like Wise and these middleware tools that are designed to interface, be a bridge between the audio content creator and the game developer. They're not factoring in that a blind sound designer might be able to contribute to those same kind of projects.
Exactly. And we are the experts, so they should give us an open door to come on in. And, in like working in the XR industry, I don't know of any other blind folks doing, anything really, because like a lot of the creative tools are not, like we're saying, not accessible. It's like, they're making gameplay more accessible, but
Sure. I mean, we tend to think about, blind creatives as veering more towards the music side of things. Like we can have a common understanding that, sure, a blind person would gravitate towards musical performance and that sort of thing, but you don't tend to see as many people doing like the visual media kind of sound design work. And so it's really interesting that that's kind of been more of your focus. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't, people are, they always bring up Stevie Wonder or Ray Charles or like Jose Feliciano, and it's like, no, I can't. I can't even try to like, aspire to be like them, because they already exist. As wonderful as they are. I don't, it's like I know some music and music theory, but it's great to just kind of break out of there and, be more, authentic to myself and be like, hey, blind people can be weirdos too when it comes to sound design, and not just virtuoso geniuses on a couple instruments.
For sure. That's very
Yeah.
cool. Well, I think we're about out of time, Andy, so it was
Cool.
great talking to you.
Hang on 1 second here. We do have a question.
One question? Okay.
First, I want to apologize to everyone who is watching us, whether it's through the stream or the record, about the weather. We have no control over that. But the question is, have you ever been sponsored by anyone? Has any company ever been impressed by what you do as you figure out things and approached you to be an advocate?
So the things that I've done is I've reached out to Shure and Apogee about their making their recording apps, like the Shure Motive app and the Apogee Meta Recorder, more accessible, and they listened and they loved the idea, and so that was me kind of reaching out, and this was a few years ago. Since then, I was given Ableton 11 Ableton Live 11 suite from Ableton to see what I thought about the accessibility, and they've done a lot for people who are visually impaired, who may want to be able to customize the color or the size of things and all these other things. But as for macros and stuff like I use in Pro Tools, it's just really not there yet. So yeah, it's not necessarily a sponsorship as it is maybe some beta testing and that sort of thing. It would be awesome if somebody wanted me to check a few things out. That's something an artist always loves, that kind of attention, to be thought of, to be kind of like, hey, check this out, tell me how this works for you, because I feel like as a blind user and disabled user, I've got so many different modes of workarounds, right? I can get the job done, but it's going to be completely different than the way a sighted person does it. So I think with testing out a product or something like that, knowing that it's versatile for a full group of people, with disabled or blind or not, I think could be really important. And a really good case study too. How did he do that? How do that sort of thing? So I'm always open to the fact, or open to the whole thing, but no, long story short, short story long, nothing official yet that I haven't reached out to myself.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? All good? All righty, guys. So I guess we're going to wrap things up. So nice talking with you again, Andy. Hopefully our students learned a lot from hearing from you. So
thanks. And I wanted to say hi to Andre Woods, who is one of your students.
He might be watching.
He's also blind. And if you don't know Andre, you got to talk to Andre about how he's using Wise, because Eric has really, done a lot to help him get to that point.
He's doing some good work.
Man.
All right. See you, Andy.
All right, guys.
All right,
you.
and one last thing is a shout out to the AVT team who put the whole production together, the stream, switching, everything that you are seeing, hopefully live or 20 seconds in delay. Graphics, all that, lighting, huge, huge help. We appreciate your effort. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
See you, Andy.